Hey everyone, Brian Christman here at the Gospel in the Doc channel. Thank you for stopping in, and if this is the first time you've checked this out, and a special thanks to those who have subscribed, and I'm hoping to get more people to subscribe to make this worthwhile endeavor for my time and for your being here, that this is ongoing. So today I'm to the point in discussing my introduction where 15 pages in I'm talking about the title of the book, The Gospel in the Doc. And so that title comes from borrowing from C.S. Lewis's God in the Dock, which is an essay in this book, a collection of essays of C.S. Lewis. One essay was called God in the Dock. And so I obviously used that phrase, God in the Dock, and replaced the gospel with God in that. So I'm just going to read this little bit about what C.S. Lewis meant by God in the Dock. He explained, and I'm just going to read a small section here. The ancient man approached God, or even the gods, as the accused person approaches the judge. For the modern man, the roles are reversed. He is the judge, God is in the dock. To Lewis, there was a substantial division between two eras of humanity, which he called the Great Divide, and which signified a great cultural change in the modern West. Again, quoting Lewis, but roughly speaking, we may say that while all history was for our ancestors divided into two periods, the pre-Christian and the Christian, for us it falls into three. The pre-Christian, the Christian, and what may reasonably be called the post-Christian. And now I comment, surprisingly, this great divide was not between the pre-Christian and Christian eras, as one might expect him to say, but between the Christian and post-Christian eras. He further explains, I'm thinking of them simply as cultural changes, and when I do that, it seems to me that the unchristianing is an even more radical change than the Christianing. Christians and pagans had much more in common with each other than either has with the post-Christian. The gap between those who worship different gods is not so wide as that between those who worship and those who don't. And then I comment, to Lewis, the ancient pagans and the Christians who succeeded them were alike in their general approach to God as those accused before God. But the modern man, this side of the divide, differs from both of these groups, approaching God as though God is in the dock. So the Great Divide that C.S. Lewis talks about, the Great Divide was between pagans and Christians and post-Christians. The divide was this modern divide where we, unlike the pagans and Christians who put themselves in the dock and as the accused before God, we place God in the dock as accused before us. That's the modern shift. And it's a great, we're on that side of the great divide where we have placed God in the dock. So it's only natural that that's where I start my book. And I just, a little more specifically than saying God in the dock, because there's so many concepts of God, well, I put the gospel in the dock, and specifically, as I spoke about in the last video, the gospel as the way of faith versus the way of power, the way of the will to power. And so we see that it's more rejecting God is also rejecting God's ways, and God's ways is the call to us to live by faith in relation to God and in relation to power, in relation to ourself, how we hold power in our own self and how we conceive of power and the way we get ahead in the world. And that's a place where I may differ from Lewis a little bit. The pagans thought they could kind of manipulate God, who has all the power, and sort of like through a sympathetic magic and sacrifices, they could get God's power on their side to go against their enemies and things like that. And I see the gospel as much different than that God became one who emptied himself of power and himself lived not by the will to power, but by faith and the faith ultimately comes down to God's love and goodness, that God's love and goodness is what overcomes the evil. So that's something I get into more. So it's not just simplistic. I'm not talking about just getting God on our side and some power struggle thing where it's all us and them, as much of fundamentalism and evangelicalism kind of falls to. Even the liberals, progressive Christians, maybe a better term nowadays, they fall into a us and them thing against the fundamentalists. So that's a power struggle. And so I try to get more into, well, who's really living by faith in the ways of God and in the book. So at any rate, that's the introduction to the title of the book. I thank you once again for being here.